Welcome back to Crawford-Clark Close-Up and our James Bond retrospective. Whether you're the most die-hard of 007 fans or you've only seen the odd few, it's undeniable that Fleming's James Bond has left an indelible mark on the big screen and on audiences like this reviewer. This video aims to take you on our view of the 60 greatest James Bond movie moments from the 25 official Eon films in the series to date to mark the 60th anniversary of this series this fall. For every cheer and whoop, there's a groan of disgust, as film is, of course, subjective. Even the greatest secret agent can't escape this kind of scrutiny from his viewers. Before we dive headfirst into our mammoth list, let's take a look at some honourable and dishonourable mentions that didn't quite make it. Whilst Shirley Eaton's Jill Masterson made a memorable mark on the film, the late Tanya Mallet as her similarly ill-fated sister Tilly has none of the same screen presence. The character comes across as deliberately irritating and rather inept when claiming to be shooting for Goldfinger when she nearly hits Bond instead. The sooner Oddjob gets her with a bowler, the better. Bond becoming Japanese makes sense narratively for Bond to blend into the environment whilst training, but the result on screen is poor. Anyone would realise that a 6-foot Scotsman is not a Japanese native. What's worse is that the disguise is all but forgotten once Bond enters the volcano base for the finale. Our dishonourable mentions tend to focus on irritatingly banal characters in the series, and Jimmy Dean's insufferable Willard White is another to add to the list. Despite getting less than 10 minutes of screen time, he's so frustrating to watch. After some truly effective partial reveals of Blofeld in From Russia and Thunderball, and the excellent Pleasance and Savalas in the last two respective films, here the camp has been dialed up to 100 with Charles Gray's interpretation. Quite literally, in fact, when Blofeld is dressed in drag to lure the bumbling Tiffany into the back of the car so he can capture her and take her to his oil rig base. Can this really be the same arch-enemy of 007? The demise of Winton Kidd is laughably bad. The two characters are very Marmite in the series. Whilst Barry's mysterious theme for the two works well, the characters do seem very redundant and clumsy in their efforts. Bond quite easily manages to dispatch these assassins overboard on the ship in the final scene, and it all looks a bit too goofy, even for this film. Let's group some more characters together here. The inept agent Rosie Carver, who Bond quickly identifies as a double agent, and again another Marmite character in the canon, Clifton James's obnoxious Sheriff J.W. Pepper, a character apparently so in demand from audiences that he appeared in 2 consecutive movies. He makes little impact in either. Then we have Britt Ekland's attractive but totally useless Mary Goodnight. The biggest crime has to be her thinking she's helped Bond in retrieving the Solex by shutting down the rock opening, but really the clouds have just obstructed the view. Next up, we have the entirely played-for-laughs gondola being steered across St Mark's Square, complete with double-taking Pigeon in Moonraker. Unnecessary humour in the most bizarre sequence up to this point in said film. Jaws falling in love and turning good is another truly bizarre turn of events in Moonraker after the menacing presence he was in the previous film. The next dishonourable mention goes to Lynn Holly Johnson's BB, unrealistically trying to seduce Moore's aging Bond into bed. BB is a largely redundant character in an otherwise far more serious and grounded Bond adventure. The manhunt in Octopussy also lands in our dishonourable mentions. Bond is hunted by Kamal, Gobinda and their men through the jungle, and Bond decides to tell a tiger to sit and perform a Tarzan yell to no one in particular in this bizarre sequence in the film. We've a few dishonourable moments to mention from Moore's final Bond, A View to a Kill. The cover of the Beach Boys' California Girls in the pre-titles, because it's so out of place. The obvious stunt doubles for Moore in the scenes in Paris. And Mayday jumping into bed with 007. Boris Grishenko is our first dishonourable mention of the Brosnan era. Alan Cumming exaggerates the accent, and the character is too irritating to even be amusing. Madonna's cameo in the fencing sequence in Die Another Day is thankfully short, though innuendo heavy, and so out of place even amidst the excess of this particular entry in the series. Also from Die Another Day is the horrid laser sequence in which Bond and an incapacitated Jinx have to team up to try and defeat one of the series' worst heavies, Mr. Kill. The sequence looks cheap and uninspired. Probably the series' biggest misfire to date is the atrocious CGI-led tsunami surfing to cap off the film's second act. Brosnan is trying his best with determined face acting, but this really is an embarrassment and surely played a large part in producers realizing they needed to have a serious rethink about the direction of future films. One of the biggest missteps of the generally lauded Daniel Craig era of Bond is the entirely wasted potential with Blofeld and resurrecting the character and the organisation of Spectre. From the moment fans knew that Christoph Waltz had been cast as the new villain, it was obvious he was playing the arch nemesis. The result? Blofeld orchestrated everything from Casino Royale up to this point to get back at Bond because Blofeld's father had a better relationship with the adopted Bond than with his own son. This is soap opera territory. The finale in Blofeld's base and back in London at MI6 from Spectre is also particularly lackluster. It seems far too simple for Bond to single-handedly incapacitate Blofeld's men and blow up the crater base, and then a scarred Blofeld orchestrates a ridiculous game of find the damsel in distress in a booby-trapped, rigged for demolition MI6. Maintaining the Blofeld theme, an actor of Waltz's caliber was criminally underused. We have an entirely out-of-character Bond try to strangle Blofeld in prison in No Time to Die, before actually inadvertently killing off a character that the producers have been trying to get back for the last 4 decades. Embarrassing. We need to discuss the character of Valdo Obruchev, played by David Dencik in No Time to Die. To say that he's one of the series' most annoying characters is a gross understatement. I'll go as far as saying he's one of the key reasons why No Time to Die doesn't strike the right tonal balance for much of the film. From the moment he's introduced in the post-title scene in the London lab, I'm begging for this buffoon to disappear. Small grace for Nomi getting the opportunity to dispatch him once and for all on Safin's base. Our next moment could be contentious, as it was certainly a brave move from the filmmakers. It's often been teased in different adventures over the last 6 decades, but it's not until the ironically titled No Time to Die that we actually get the death of 007. When taking Daniel Craig's era as its own, separate from the rest of the series, it works in a narrative sense to have a full circle birth and death of Bond. It's just the execution of the scene itself that leaves a lot to be desired for this viewer. I remember sitting in my seat numb to what I was watching when I saw the film on opening night, in disbelief that they've actually done this and managed to keep it from leaking out following any advanced previews. But it does feel unnecessary for the character to just completely give in to the virus and accept his fate in this way. Our final dishonourable mention grieves me more, though, in many ways. Whilst I'm happy for the musical nods to Louis Armstrong's timeless We Have All the Time in the World that are used as Bond and Madeline are driving through Matera, it was unnecessary to take the full song, which already belongs to its own Bond adventure on Her Majesty's Secret Service, and parade it here over the end credits. The theme was used for Bond and Tracy and their realistic union before Bond is suddenly bereaved. It's not a theme for Bond and Madeline's shallow relationship. This hasn't sat well with me since the first viewing, and it's unlikely to grow in my estimation. Phew, I've been pretty negative so far, so now that's out of the way, there are plenty of honourable mentions to discuss before we get into our top 60. So let's go back to the beginning. That's a Smith & Wesson, and you've had your 6. Bond shoots Dent in cold blood in Dr. No. Bond has the upper hand on the shifty Dent, rearranging the bed sheets in Miss Taro's home to suggest that Bond is sleeping and will be caught unawares, when really he's silently observing Dent entering the room from behind the door, playing cards to pass the time while he waits. It's a quiet but effective sequence from the first film. Next up is the first death of 007 in From Russia with Love. They've killed 007 off in a number of devilish ways over the years, but the first time they did it, audaciously we might add, was at the end of Donald Grant's training exercise in the From Russia with Love pre-titles. It's an effective opener to the second Bond adventure. Bond briefed by Q on the Aston Martin DB5 in Goldfinger. This is only the second scene between Connery's Bond and Desmond Llewellyn's unforgettable Q, but it's clear that there's plenty of disdain from the quartermaster towards Bond this time around, at the request of director Guy Hamilton. Bond doesn't treat anything Q Branch give him with any respect, so in turn, Q gives Bond little respect. The face Connery pulls when Q suggests he's going to keep him there for an hour to debrief about the Aston Martin modifications is a beauty. Another solid sequence in the third Bond outing is the game of golf between hero and villain. There's lots of snide comments from both as they get to the last few holes of the course, and Bond decides to one-up Goldfinger once again by replacing his ball with another. It's a short but effective sequence between Bond and the villain that works really well. Oddjob represents one of the most physical heavies Bond has faced off against in the series, and in what better location to set this than in the Cathedral of Gold itself, Fort Knox. Bond looks defeated, slumped against the bars, winded, and feeling like he's going to explode alongside the ticking bomb, until he hoists Oddjob by his own petard with the bowler hat. This is another great action beat in a film with many classic Bond moments. Fiona sits out the dance. Thunderball. Bond tries to find a way of getting out of the situation when he's surrounded by Largo's goons, and the series' first femme fatale, Fiona Volpe. Bond drags a woman to the dance floor to try to throw them off the scent before Fiona tracks him down. Bond's expert timing ensures that Fiona gets the bullet instead, leading to another great one-liner. Little Nelly, you only live twice. Inspired by the real Commander Ken Wallace flying the model itself, Cubby Broccoli decided that the nifty gadget would be a welcome addition to the new Bond adventure, and so Wallace himself flew the gyrocopter in the film. Q is irritated by having to transport Nellie out to Japan for Bond, especially when Bond takes a little notice of Q's briefing. The following aerial assault is one of the film's most engaging sequences, accompanied by the rousing James Bond theme, as well as John Barry's alternative 007 theme. The love montage next, from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Here's a chance to see Bond and Tracy's relationship develop in a sweet montage set to the stunning love theme for the film from the incomparable Louis Armstrong, We Have All the Time in the World. Also from Majesty's, we have Bond cracking Gumbold's safe. Bond has an hour while Gebruder Gumbold is on his lunch break to break into his office and crack his safe to make copies of his letters between Count Balthazar de Blochon and Sir Hilary Bray. Despite knowing that Bond will get out of the office in time without evading capture, it's still a tense sequence, and a playful one, as we also see Bond flicking through a copy of Playboy magazine. Car chase on the Vegas Strip. Diamonds Are Forever. One of the more engaging scenes in Diamonds is the car chase through downtown Vegas. It's an impressive feat, despite the obvious growing crowd of onlookers clearly enjoying the filming going on around them. Even the car emerging from the alleyway on its opposite side, an impossibility, isn't a bad capper to a solid sequence. From The Man with the Golden Gun, Bond meets Lazar. Bond gets the upper hand meeting the manufacturer of Scaramanga's golden bullets and ends up aiming the rifle directly at his piece in an amusing sequence. Scaramanga shot in his funhouse. The funhouse itself may be a cheesy concept, but Bond switching places with Scaramanga's mannequin and firing at the villain is a classic moment. The look on Scaramanga's face when he realises he's been bested is excellent. Christopher Lee's Scaramanga is certainly one of the highlights of the film. Pyramids of Giza, The Spy Who Loved Me. Jaws is a chilling figure in this film, and this sequence is one of the most impressive in Spy, almost a scene from a horror film with Marvin Hamlish's foreboding score. Bond causes the death of the lab technicians, Moonraker. There are many more highlights in Moonraker than most people often remember, and the scene in which Bond inadvertently causes the death of 2 lab technicians through a lethal poison dispersed in the air is a great one. 009 Stabbed in the Back. Octopussy. Another effective early scene in one of the movies, this is 009 mid-mission trying to escape from twins Mishka and Grishka with the Fabergé egg MacGuffin in Octopussy. The next honourable mention from the same film is Bond accompanying Jim Fanning to Sotheby's for the auction of the Fabergé egg and pushing villain Kamal Khan's buttons as to how much he's willing to bid for its purchase. Bond swapping the real act for the fake is a classic Moore Bond moment, much to the horror of M. Also from Octopussy is Bond confronting Orlov on the train. Moore's Bond is particularly effective in his anger at the plan with the bomb. To those who say Moore isn't authentic in the role, give this scene another watch. The next honourable mention comes from The Living Daylights, with Dalton's 007 working alongside Saunders across from the Conservatoire, preparing for Koskov's defection. It's Bond's precision in his work and showing up some of Saunders' incompetence that makes the scene work really well. 4 honourable mentions from Licence to Kill, the first of which being the introduction to villain Sanchez. Finding your girlfriend in bed with another man is bad enough, but then proceeding to whip the girl and ordering your heavies to cut out the heart of the other man is pretty vicious. It's a memorable early entrance for a strong main villain. Next up is Bond sending Killifer in with the shark, with the help of ally Sharky and his perfect timing, with Killifer positioned over the trapdoor. The look of grim satisfaction on Bond's face when he knows he's paid Leiter back in some small way for Buddy Killifer's betrayal is satisfying. The next honourable mention for Licence to Kill is another vicious villain moment, as Sanchez, believing that Crest is trying to cheat him out of his own money, decides to decompress him. It's one of the most grisly deaths in the Bond series, but it's definitely memorable. Finally, from one of my favourite Bond adventures, we have another lovely bit of continuity, as Bond is sombre on leaving the wedding reception of Della and Felix, as Della tries to give James her garter to be the next to marry. It's up to Felix to inform his bride and remind audiences that James was married once, but it was a long time ago. It's a short little sequence, but highly effective. From GoldenEye, we have the excellent effects and model work from the late Derek Meddings and his team for the Seven Eye Blast, the new M giving Bond a cold reception in her office, referring to him as a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, an example of superb dialogue in this film, the tank chase through St. Petersburg in the second act, and Bond and Alec's brutal fight on the dish in the climax. In Tomorrow Never Dies, the honourable mentions go to Bond and Dr. Kaufman and their exchange in the hotel room. Vincent Schiavelli was inspired casting for the unique secondary character in the series, and the awesome pre-titles action of Bond escaping the terrorist arms bazaar. One honourable mention from The World Is Not Enough, which is the general dynamic between Bond and Elektra. From the moment he reaches out at the screen with the news footage of Elektra's kidnapping to the moment he beds her at her chateau, you can see Brosnan's Bond falling for this woman, which we haven't witnessed in such a genuine way for some time until this point. From Die Another Day, it's the Bond MI6 simulation. The scene still manages to raise a smile as it leads in nicely to the obligatory Bond and Q scene. It's also not quite as on the nose as the Bond and Moneypenny scene in the finale. There are so many fantastic moments in Casino Royale that we've got a few honourable mentions to discuss. The first is the high adrenaline pre-titles action showing us Bond earning his 00 status with his 2 kills. Next up is Daniel Craig versus Sebastian Foucan in the free-running action sequence. This is the perfect kind of sequence for the rough and ready 007, still trying to find his feet and still making some rookie mistakes along the way. Later in the film, we have the vicious stairwell fight between Urbano and Bond, where you can feel every punch and every crash down the steps. It's a visceral and effective sequence. Bond meeting Vesper and the both of them sizing each other up on the train to Montenegro is the last honourable mention from Craig's debut. From Quantum of Solace, our honourable mentions go to the Tosca shootout, one of the most atmospheric and best edited sequences in the film as a whole, and the emotional moment between Bond and a terrified Camille that they're both going to burn to death in the crumbling hotel. Take a deep breath, make it count. From Skyfall, we've chosen Take the Bloody Shot from the end of the pre-titles, which sees another Death of 007 moment for the series. The shootout between Bond and Patrice in Shanghai, with some really beautiful cinematography from Roger Deakins, the introduction to our new M and to Moneypenny in the closing scene, and Bond arriving at the floating casino in Macau. For Spectre, our honourable mentions are Bond tailing Sciarra in the final section of the pre-titles through the Day of the Dead parade, and the train fight with Hinks. Also, Bond taking down the assassins and seducing Monica Bellucci's Lucia Sciarra. From No Time to Die, we have the reunion of Daniel Craig and Ana de Armas as Bond comes out of retirement and heads to Cuba to team up with Paloma at the Spectre party. This feels like a sequence you'd have found in a Bond movie of old, and Craig and de Armas spark off each other brilliantly. Oh, and that dress. So, we're about ready to bring you our ranking of the 60 greatest James Bond moments. Of course, as always, this is a subjective list, so we're not expecting you to agree with our choices, but we have tried to rationalise our choices and their places in our ranking. Feel free to let us know what you think of our list and tell us your favourite 007 moments in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one. Without any further ado, let's kick this list off at number 60 with Bond kills the real Peter Franks. Diamonds Are Forever. After a surreal bit of disguise as Bond fake embraces someone outside of Tiffany's apartment building, Bond gets into the lift with the real Franks and the fight commences. The series revels in the fights in tight spaces, and this is no exception. One of few highlights in an artistic nadir for the Bond canon. At 59, it's City Hall is ablaze in A View to a Kill. Bond and Stacey are trapped in a burning elevator inside City Hall, with Zorin having framed Bond for the murder of Stacey's ex-boss. The sequence is well executed, even if Stacey's incessant screaming of "James!" is insufferable. At 58, we have Bond and Graves fencing in Die Another Day. In one of the more believable sequences in the maligned Die Another Day, Bond and Graves decide to duel at Blade's fencing club. The two of them do genuinely look like they want to kill each other by the end of the sequence. Number 57 is Bond waiting in his hotel room to see who Carver will send in Tomorrow Never Dies. In a scene reminiscent of Connery's Bond waiting for the arrival of Professor Dent at Miss Taro's home 35 years earlier, Brosnan's Bond looks the epitome of cool in his loose shirt and bow tie, waiting in his hotel room to see which of his cronies Carver will send. At 56, skydiving stunt work from Moonraker. The pre-titles of the Bond series are usually some of the most creative in film, and the opening to Moonraker is little exception. We have the return of Jaws after the open-ended finale to The Spy Who Loved Me, and Bond gets embroiled in action mid-flight as he's pushed from a plane without a parachute. The real heroes of the sequence are B.J. Worth and Jake Lombard, who performed the impressive stunt work for real. Number 55 is Mayday betraying Zorin from A View to a Kill. Realizing that he's left all his team for dead, Mayday is a woman scorned and is ready to pay Zorin back. The look on her face when she knows she's destroyed Zorin's Project Mainstrike is a great moment. At 54, Bond is cremated in Diamonds Are Forever. In Diamond's most effective scene, coincidentally the final scene that Connery shot during his time on the series, Bond is knocked unconscious, placed into a coffin, and almost cremated by silent assassins Winton Kidd. It's a genuinely frightening concept that you wouldn't even wish on your enemies, and even the super cool Connery looks like he's struggling to keep his composure. Number 53 is the death of Aki from You Only Live Twice. Let's be honest, Aki is the lead Bond girl in You Only Live Twice, and as Bond remarks, she's a confident agent who remains loyal throughout the story, which makes her demise to poison meant for Bond, while she's helplessly sleeping, one of the more crushing ends to a character in the series. Bond looks genuinely morose when he realises what has happened. At 52, we've Bond messing with the deck of lovers in Live and Let Die. This is certainly Bond at his most misogynistic, as he tricks Solitaire into giving him her virginity by tampering with her cards, the source of her power, rendering her useless to her master. It's an amusing sequence that demonstrates Bond's power over women. We turn to Octopussy at 51 with double sixes. Fancy that. Bond bests Kamal once again by beating him at backgammon with the loaded dice. The way Bond doesn't even have to look down to check that it is in fact a double six is a gem of a moment. Beginning our top 50 moments, we have Bond reunited with Mr. White in Spectre. We haven't seen Mr. White since his fleeting appearances in Quantum of Solace, but White is an important lead for Bond to advance the story when he visits him living like a hermit in Austria. It's one of the film's most atmospheric and engaging character moments. At 49, it's time to say farewell to series stalwart Desmond Llewellyn with Q's escape plan from The World Is Not Enough. Whilst the Q scene in the film is a funny one, introducing John Cleese's R into the fold, it's bittersweet to know that Llewellyn was truly bowing out here as the actor would be involved in a car crash at the end of 1999 around the film's release. His mark on the series can't be overstated. Number 48 sees Bond's remote-controlled escape in Tomorrow Never Dies. Shot in June 1997 in the car park of Brent Cross Shopping Centre in the UK, doubling for Hamburg, this is a fun sequence which contains one of David Arnold's greatest Bond cues, the energetic backseat driver. At 47, Bond decides to leave green in the desert at the end of Quantum of Solace. Having obtained the information he needs about Organisation Quantum, Bond decides to leave green in the desert with motor oil to see how long he'll survive. It's an amusingly satisfying end to a somewhat banal villain. Number 46 is the staple scene that all prospective Bond actors must audition to see how well they do with the charm. Connery and Daniela Bianchi are terrific together in the scene, accompanied by John Barry's sumptuous score. My friends call me Tanya. Mine call me James Bond. From Russia with Love. At 45, Anya dresses down Bond in The Spy Who Loved Me. We get to see both a suave and vulnerable side to Moore's Bond for the first time in this sequence, as Anya refers to Bond's doomed marriage in an affectionate nod back to Majesty's and a nice bit of continuity. This is supposed to be the same 007 who lost Tracy years earlier, and Moore plays the emotion of the moment effectively. Number 44 is Jaws clowning around in Moonraker. A nightmarish moment from Moonraker involves Jaws donned in clown costume advancing through the crowd towards Manuela at the Rio Carnival. It's the most chilling and intimidating moment for the late Richard Keel's giant Jaws across the two films in which he features. At number 43, Bond visits Tracy's grave in For Your Eyes Only. In a touching bit of continuity which remained in the script even after Moore decided to return for a fifth go at the role, Bond visits Tracy's grave. We learn she was 26 when she died, and the grave is inscribed with "We have all the time in the world." At number 42, we have Bond and Alex reunion in the graveyard from GoldenEye. Coming midway through Brosnan's debut, Bond is reunited with the treacherous Alec Trevelyan in an atmospheric sequence where we learn a little from the dialogue of Bond and Alec's different childhoods. It's a quiet, reflective moment, and Brosnan and Sean Bean are terrific together as allies turned enemies. In at 41, we've Felix being fed to the shark from License to Kill. In a scene lifted once again from Fleming's own Live and Let Die, this showed guts from the filmmakers to depict a more frightening set of villains and some grisly violent scenes. David Hedison is a superb Felix, and the scene is on the right side of gritty, as is Dalton discovering Della and Felix's bodies after the event. The top 40 begins with another moment adapted from Fleming's pages, the Keelhaul sequence from For Your Eyes Only. Lifted directly from Fleming's own Live and Let Die, Christatos orders Bond and Melina to be dragged across shark-infested ocean. A great novel moment that they finally managed to fit into a Bond movie narrative. At 39, we're disarming the bomb in Octopussy. Despite many fans ridiculing the sequence, Moore's Bond in disguise as a clown stopping the bomb from detonating in the circus and killing thousands of people is a tense sequence played without the laughs and is one of the best executed scenes in the film. At 38, Bond ascends St. Cyril's in For Your Eyes Only. One of the tensest moments in a Bond third act in some time, Bond attempts to climb to the top of the monastery with Apostis trying to sabotage him at every turn. Conti's menacing score, coupled with moments of complete silence, make for a brilliant introduction to the finale. For number 37, we're right up to date with Safin invading Mr. White's home from No Time to Die. Complete with creepy No Mask, No Time to Die can boast the most chilling pre-titles in the series, as young Madeline tries to evade capture from L'Homme Masqué, as she later refers to him. It's a very solid start to the film, and refreshing to have a Bond movie that begins from the perspective of someone other than Bond, and utilises flashback as well. At 36, this is how you construct a meeting of Spectre agents in Thunderball. Blofeld is once again masked, but the authority is there from the beginning of the scene until the end. The set design from Ken Adam is brilliant in its simplicity. It's so effective that Number Nine's death by electrocution was parodied by Mike Myers himself for Dr. Evil in Austin Powers 3 decades on. Number 35 is the La Paris battle in The Spy Who Loved Me. Alongside the volcano-based construction for You Only Live Twice, Ken Adams' incredible tanker set for the big action sequence in the third act is impressive to behold. Shot on the newly erected 007 stage at Pinewood in late 1976, the action still holds up really well. At 34, Corinne goes to the dogs in Moonraker. One of the series' most chilling moments, Drax knows that Corinne has revealed secrets to Bond in his study, so he terminates her contract, literally, by setting the Dobermans on her in the woods. The run through the woods and the dogs catching up with Corinne, who can run no further, is like something out of a horror movie, and despite being at odds with the general slapstick tone of the rest of the film, is a solidly directed scene. In at 33, we've got the DB5 chase in Matera from No Time to Die. In an extended pre-title sequence, enraged that Spectre have tracked down Bond and Madeline in Matera, Bond frantically speeds through the streets, and the iconic Aston Martin sees the most action it's ever seen in the franchise. A great action sequence. From one chase to another, at 32 we have the pre-titles Chase Down the Thames from The World Is Not Enough. Still one of the most engaging vehicle chases in the series, Bond makes after the cigar girl along the Thames in the exciting World Is Not Enough pre-titles. To think, director Michael Apted nearly chose to condense the 14-minute opener down to Bond escaping the Bilbao banker's office before the titles. Thank goodness for preview screenings. Just missing out on our top 30 at 31 is Bond confronting Yusuf at the end of Quantum of Solace. Few Bond actors can display the authority that Craig displays in this short but highly effective moment. Bond is a man not to cross, yet he still manages to keep Vesper's boyfriend Yusuf alive for further questioning, much to M and the audience's surprise given the haphazard way Bond has casually dispatched people throughout the rest of the film. Breaking into the top 30, we start with the corkscrew jump from The Man with the Golden Gun. Were this solely a list of best Bond stunts, this would be in the top 5. As it stands, this hits the halfway mark in our Bond movie moments ranking. The second of Roger Moore's Bond adventures to feature a signature stunt. This time it's the corkscrew jump completed in one take by Bumps Willard on June the 1st, 1974, despite producer Cubby Broccoli suggesting they could get it even better on a second take. The stunt left Moore himself in tears on set at how seamless it all appeared. It's a standout in another mediocre Bond adventure, only let down, as everyone knows, by John Barry's choice to add a goofy slide whistle sound over the stunt itself. It still boggles the mind that this was approved. At 29, we have the audacious Bond being captured, then traded at the beginning of Die Another Day. For a film full of little nods to past Bond adventures, as this was the 40th anniversary release, this was admittedly the producers trying to break some new ground, with Bond actually outright failing a mission and getting captured in Korea for 14 months. The sequence with Bond being traded coming after the title sequence is solid. Number 28 is the Citroen 2CV chase from For Your Eyes Only. This is Bond and the lead girl in one of the series' most enjoyable car chases in the unlikely Deux Chevaux. The sequence is made by Bill Conti's vibrant score, A Drive in the Country. At 27, it's back to Brosnan and the bungee jump down the dam from the opening of GoldenEye. Stuntman Wayne Michaels performed the extraordinary moment, which is made all the better for the lack of music. A great way to launch Bond into the 1990s and make audiences immediately pay attention for what's to come. Next at 26, we've Bond killing Elektra in cold blood in The World Is Not Enough. You can tell that Bond was beginning to fall for Elektra, which makes the choice he has to make come the final act all the more crushing. Brosnan's Bond has never looked more authoritative than when his gun is pointed at Elektra and he's demanding she radio Renard to call off the plan. Bond's "I never miss" and lean over Elektra's lifeless body is an underappreciated moment during Brosnan's Bond tenure. At 25, we have the moment that caused a few tears when watching back in 2012, as it was the end of an era, the death of M from Skyfall. Realizing that she did do one thing right in making James a 00 and trusting in her agent, Bond losing his only parental figure left in his life is pretty heartbreaking. Even director Sam Mendes behind the camera was wiping away tears when Dame Judi Dench's final scene in the series was shot after 17 years. We stick with Craig's Bond at 24 with Bond tortured by Le Chiffre in Casino Royale. It was always going to be a challenge adapting Fleming's premiere Bond novel for the screen and making it relevant for a modern audience. The gambling was shifted to poker stakes, Vesper is more fleshed out in the movie than in the novel, but the torture sequence remains, and it's one of the more visceral scenes in the series, despite being laced with some humour about Le Chiffre scratching Bond's balls. At 23, it's the first Timothy Dalton moment to make our list, with Bond's anger at Saunders' death in The Living Daylights. In an uncharacteristically shocking death for a side character in a Bond movie, the initially stuffy Saunders has come up trumps to provide Bond with the resources he needs to continue his mission, but Necros has the upper hand and orchestrates the doors of the Prater Park Cafe to crush Saunders on his exit. An enraged Bond even inadvertently pulls his gun on an unsuspecting child when trying to catch Necros. It's a short but highly effective moment for Dalton's 007. Number 22 sees Bond resigning and Moneypenny saving the day in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. The scenes between Lazenby's Bond and M and Moneypenny really sparkle, none more so than Bond's disgust at M's insistence that he be removed from Operation Bedlam as he hasn't managed to track down Blofeld in 2 years. Not only is this welcome continuity, but it shows the stubbornness of Bond by immediately deciding to resign. Moneypenny isn't having any of this and changes the memo to request a fortnight's leave instead, which M grants. The icing on the cake is M thanking Moneypenny over the intercom for fixing the situation. Amidst all this, we even get a glimpse of Bond's office and some relics from his first 5 missions, despite this being a different actor in the role. A wonderful scene. Just shy of our top 20 at 21, we have Tennyson and Enquiry from Skyfall. This brilliant sequence sees Bond racing to beat Silva and his men to the Board of Inquiry to protect M from attack. Bond running towards Westminster with the voiceover of Dench's Tennyson recital about the importance of national security and the 00 branch is a real punch-the-air moment. Breaking into our top 20 James Bond movie moments at 20, we have the centrifuge sequence from Moonraker. Time for Bond to test out the training simulator. The only problem? Cha is at the controls. Bond has rarely looked more in peril than he does in this sequence, and Moore sells it brilliantly when the machine stops and Dr. Goodhead tries to offer him support, but he leans against the wall and rejects her help. This is one of the most effective sequences in the film. Silva's one-take opening monologue from Skyfall next at 19. Bond can only sit and listen to Silva's allegory of 2 rats fighting for survival as he's strapped to the chair. Bardem's Silva is dynamite opposite Craig, taunting him about his loyalty to MI6, despite M putting Bond back out on active service, having failed his evaluations. The sequence is shot brilliantly, and the tension between the two of them is palpable. At 18, Jill gets the gold in Goldfinger. Bond uncovers Goldfinger's card-cheating scheme and beds the villain's confidant, Jill. It all seems like another typical conquest for 007 until the blow across the head from Oddjob and Bond regaining consciousness to discover Jill smothered in gold paint draped across the bed. Actress Shirley Eaton revelled in the publicity for the film back in 1964 during the dizzy heights of Bond mania, and it's a startling image for so early in the film. Goldfinger already proves he's a villain not to mess with, and there's even shock and anger in Bond's eyes when he realises what's happened. The Bond team tried to replicate the effect with Fields in Quantum of Solace, but it never landed nearly as effectively as the OG. Number 17 sees Bond jumping the crocs in Live and Let Die. Performed on New Year's Eve of 1972 towards the end of production by the real crocodile farm owner Ross Kananga, by whom the film's villain is named, this is one of the most impressive stunts in the whole series. Bond is in peril, stranded on a small island in the middle of a crocodile pool. The only thing he can do when he learns that his magnetic watch from Q isn't going to work is to wait for the crocs to form a line and then jump across their backs to safety. The stunt appears on screen for less than 5 seconds, yet it takes a number of attempts for the real Kananga to perfect it. At 16, Bond proposes to Tracy in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. They've escaped Blofeld, Bunt, and the rest of the goons thanks to Tracy, and have found seclusion in the warm from the snowstorm. Here's the time for Bond to propose. It's a soft, beautifully directed scene with Bond pouring his heart out and seriously deciding it's time to quit the service. Of course, we know it's not meant to be, but it's still a wonderful moment in the series. Bond's finally met a woman who he feels he can settle down with. Number 15 is Craig's 007 finally getting the opportunity to say that line, "The name's Bond, James Bond," in the final moments of Casino Royale. It was a conscious choice. This was Bond starting out, earning his 00, finishing the mission, then being given the big moment, and Craig doesn't disappoint. Standing aloft Mr. White, there's authority and precision in his movement and delivery, which perfectly tops off one of the best Bond adventures in the series. At 14, Blofeld is finally revealed in You Only Live Twice. The shadowy organisation Spectre have played such a significant villainous role in the 60s Bond adventures, and it's finally here that Bond and the audience come face to face with the iconic Ernst Stavro Blofeld. Donald Pleasance is inspired casting as the malevolent archenemy, softly spoken yet authoritative and supremely confident, even when he sees his magnificent volcano base invaded. It's one of the most effective villain introductions in the series, plus it includes a title drop. Number 13 is a real character building moment. Following the violent stairwell brawl between Bond and Urbano, Bond returns to the game, but when he later returns to the hotel room, he's shocked to find Vesper fully clothed, sitting in the shower under the running water. Bond comforts her and brings her close in one of the series' most tender moments. David Arnold's Vesper theme is used to brilliant effect in this scene. Number 12 is Bond kicking Locke off the cliff in For Your Eyes Only. The most sadistic Bond has been for some time, certainly the most dangerous Moore's Bond has ever been. This is a signature moment in the series, as the silent Locke gets his comeuppance in satisfying style. Just missing out on a space in our hallowed top 10, at 11, we have Bond and Grant fighting it out in From Russia with Love. Filmed across the last 2 weeks of June 1963, mid-production, Robert Shaw is dynamite and in total control of the situation as Spectre agent Donald Grant reducing Bond to his knees until Bond gets the upper hand. The hand-to-hand fight in such an enclosed space as a train compartment with the noise of the engine makes for one of the most exciting action sequences in the whole series. Bond looks genuinely exhausted come the end of the scene where he knows he's reached Grant's escape. So we've made it to our top 10 James Bond movie moments. Thanks for sticking with us this far, if you're still watching, and a quick reminder here to click subscribe at the top of the page to ensure you don't miss out on any new videos on the channel. We begin our top 10 by going back to the beginning and Honey emerging from the waves in Dr. No. Bond has his dalliances in the first half of his debut screen outing with Sylvia Trench and Miss Taro, but it's not until an hour into the movie that we get the iconic entrance of the stunning Ursula Andress as Honey Rider emerging from the crisp Jamaican waters with shell in hand and knife on hip, singing Underneath the Mango Tree. Bond's face mirrors the audience's as we can't take our eyes off this voluptuous Venus who's come into the story. Andress looks confident in the scene, and she and Connery sparkle together. We also get the one and only time to date that Bond has been heard singing in the series, trying to startle Honey and impress her simultaneously. As far as Bond girl entrances go, this one's hard to beat. In at number 9 is Bond and Tracy's marriage and Moneypenny getting the hat in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. A beautiful sequence with, as director Peter Hunt instructed, hundreds of flowers. We get to see the only interaction between Lazenby's Bond and Q in this film, and Q's further disdain for Bond's lack of respect for government property when he tosses his hat to a tearful Moneypenny in a really sweet moment. At number 8, it's Dalton's Bond reveal from The Living Daylights. Mid-training exercise on the Rock of Gibraltar is where we find a cohort of double O's in the pre-titles of The Living Daylights. We're curious as to when we're going to get our first glimpse of Dalton's Bond and how it's going to compare to his 3 predecessors, and it doesn't disappoint. For my money, this is second only to Connery's introduction at the gambling table in Dr. No as the best introduction to a new 007. The way Dalton turns in full stealth mode as a fellow agent tumbles to his death from the rock face sets him up as a physical new protagonist very nicely. In 007's place, we have Bond using the Felix lighter to ignite Sanchez in License to Kill. For perhaps the series' most satisfying hero-villain showdown, look no further than the climax to License to Kill. It's not enough for Sanchez to realize that Bond is a spy who has infiltrated his organization and played him for a fool by sowing the seeds of doubt. He now uses the lighter given to him by Felix and Della to set Sanchez alight. Bruised and bloodied, the standoff between the two and the preceding tanker chase are a real series highlight, and the look of sheer relief that it's all over from Dalton as he leans against the rock to assess the scene is fantastic. Just shy of our top 5 at 6 is No, Mr. Bond, I Expect You to Die from Goldfinger. Now for perhaps the most quoted villain's line in the whole series. Bond has crashed his Aston trying to evade capture from Oddjob and Goldfinger's men, which brings him to Goldfinger's laser table. The look of fear on Bond's face is genuine. He's going to lose his manhood in a matter of minutes, so he needs to use his way with words to get himself out of the situation. This is a key sequence to once again show just how sadistic Goldfinger really is. The relief on Bond's face when Goldfinger instructs his workers to power down the laser is palpable. Our top 5 moments begin with Bond interrogating Pushkin in The Living Daylights. One of the greatest moments for any Bond actor, Dalton's Bond is in total control as he's prepared to kill a man he once considered an ally. He gets a quip in about lilies, but otherwise is a cold, ruthless man, much like the man on Fleming's pages. In 4th place, it's Bond betrayed by Vesper and Vesper's sacrifice in Casino Royale. One of the most heartbreaking moments in all of Bond is Vesper knowing that she has to kill herself for her guilt at the close of Casino Royale. This is an example of the movie adaptation excelling over the original source novel, as Craig's Bond frantically tries to break into the sunken elevator to rescue Vesper before she runs out of breath. The silent embrace between the two of them under the water and Vesper's haunting last moments are devastating to watch. At number 3, There's No Hurry, You See, we have all the time in the world on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Perhaps best isn't the right adjective, but Majesty's definitely has the most series-defining ending, with Bond and Tracy's honeymoon cut horrifyingly short by Blofeld and Bunt in a drive-by shooting. Lifted directly from Fleming's novel, it's a sombre and shocking end to the usually upbeat and fist-pumping Bond finales, as Bond cradles his dead bride, lost for words and sobbing into her dress. Director Hunt instructed Lazenby not to cry for the sequence, insisting James Bond doesn't cry, but you still hear some faint sobbing before the Bond theme proper kicks us back into reality. Many ardent Bond aficionados look at the ending to Majesties and believe that Sean Connery would have elevated the scene even further, whereas I'm of the opinion that the scene and the film as a whole works because it's such an anomaly of a story within the Bond canon. The Connery movies had become fantastical, and Connery's Bond was getting too suave for such a serious take on the character. It's ultimately George Lazenby's lack of acting chops and more sensitive take on the role that make this moment shine. So, in second place, we've gone for Bond, James Bond from Dr. No. Sean Connery makes his entrance as the first screen 007 in a sequence from the series' first director Terence Young, who used the movie Juarez as inspiration for Bond's first reveal. Filmed 2 months into production on Dr. No in March 1962, the image on screen is indelible. Bond is gambling and flirting across the table with the beautiful Sylvia Trench. It's a stroke of genius to introduce the character as Bond, James Bond, where Fleming rarely did this in the original source novels, but it's become a trademark over the years with the cinematic Bond, to the point where it's missed by fans if it's not heard in some form or another in each film. Therefore, there are only a few films in the series not to include the infamous line, the series' second film, From Russia with Love, and Daniel Craig's second, Quantum of Solace. Connery looks the epitome of cool, striking the lighter against his cigarette nonchalantly at the chemin de fer table whilst dressing to impress. His actions are those of a man in control of his surroundings, with the cigarette smoke around him almost acting like a bright light announcing his arrival. It's a one-of-a-kind introduction to a screen character which comes 8 minutes into the film proper. Condensing 6 decades of James Bond down into 60 key moments is an insane task, and one we've not taken lightly. There's been plenty of deliberation about what goes where, which moment makes more of an impact than others, but for us, our number one has to be the Union Jack parachute in The Spy Who Loved Me. This really is the epitome of cool. Funky soundtrack, tick. Great skiing, tick. Thrilling action, tick. All topped off by the most extraordinary stunt. It shouldn't even be real. Yet Rick Sylvester is the brave fella who did it. Opening up that Union Jack parachute is a stroke of genius, and the close-up of Moore coming down from the stunt, heading into Maurice Binder's best title design and Carly Simon's anthemic Nobody Does It Better, makes this quintessential 007. It's no real wonder that audiences continue to cheer at this film's opening over 4 decades on. So there you go, our condensing of the 6-decade-long Bond series to date into 60 unforgettable Bond moments. Let us know your thoughts on our choices in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. Come and find Crawford-Clark Close-Up on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. You can email us suggestions for reviews to crawfordclarkcloseup@gmail.com, and you can follow us on movie app Letterboxd. Search CC Close-Up. James Bond will return in our ranking video of all 25 movies in the series before the end of this anniversary year. For now, thanks for watching, and until next time, that's a wrap.